welcome back. Emily here. So glad that you could join us. So, as you may have gathered from the title, we are looking at Matthew Krishanu, his exhibition at the Camden Art Centre, the Bough Breaks. So, this is an exhibition of painting, lots and lots of new works from the artist, which is pretty cool. And Joanna and I didn't necessarily see eye to eye on it, but I have to say, this conversation for me was just really eye-opening in terms of, seeing what Joanna saw and rethinking what I saw in light of it, which is the beauty of talking about exhibitions, right? Which is the beauty of art, taking us to new places and bringing in new ideas for us to consider and deepening how we think and experience art and life, dare I say. So I hope that you enjoy it, and thanks for listening. Hello, and welcome back to Exhibitionistas, the podcast where we go and see exhibitions, and hopefully you do too, and we talk about them with you. Simple as that. So this week we're going to be looking at Matthew Krishna's soulful exhibition, The Bough Breaks, on display at the Camden Art Centre. My name is Emily Harding. I'm an art lover and an exhibition goer.
And hello, thanks for being here. I'm very happy to be visiting the Camden Art Centre with you. I love it so, so much. It's a peaceful building where I have seen some of the most exciting exhibitions in my life. My name is Joanna Pierre-Neves. I'm an independent writer and curator. And thank you for interacting with us on our Instagram account, by the way. We keep getting answers to our first question. Soon enough, we will post a new one. So, meanwhile, if you don't follow us, please do. Our account is exhibitionistas_podcast. You can get info about upcoming episodes and you can comment not only on the questions asked, but also on the posts themselves. We're interested in knowing what you think, in knowing if we forgot to mention something, or if you are excited about the information that we've shared in the podcast, or if you have something else to say. And who knows, maybe we'll read your contributions. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Yeah, no, it has been absolutely brilliant to see some of the responses there. And it would be great, like if there's a bit of controversy, you say that you loved it, but I didn't love it, or vice versa. I mean, let's get
Exactly.
into the controversy of it. That's what it's all about, is having a good chat about what we've experienced at exhibitions. But so before we get into it, Joanna, what was your week in culture like? I think you've had a big one.
Yes, it was a packed week. I've just arrived from Lisbon last night. I went there to have a meeting of the director of one of the most beautiful museums in Europe called MAT, which is the Museum of Art, Architecture and Technology, because I have an exhibition there
Hmm.
next year it's a solo exhibition, so something close to our hearts,
Hmm.
with Isabelle Ferreira. He was a French artist, second generation Portuguese immigration, but she's based in France. She was born there. And so we went there to have a meeting. And then there was Arco Lisbon as well. So the art fair, which was incredible. I have to say, the quality is up there. So
Mm.
kudos to the organization. There were so many people during the opening on the first day. And the following days, it was really, really packed with interesting people who were asking the right questions. The gallerists were happy. But while I was in the plane, I reconnected with an old love. So that was my weekend culture top pick this week, New Yorker Fiction podcast,
Oof, so
which
good.
is right. I remember us talking about it back in the
You
day.
recommended it to me, and
Did I?
I quickly devoured almost all of them. And it's one of those things that, like, when Peter is away, when he's away for a work,
Yeah, exactly.
I fell asleep to it, and it is just the most wonderful thing. Yeah. For my week, so I watched The Holdovers. Did you watch this? Paul Giamatti.
I did.
yeah, nominated for an Oscar, and it's one I've been wanting to watch for a while because there was lots of buzz around it.
Yeah.
And just aesthetically, it looked really cool. It had a really distinct,
Yeah.
very 70s style to it. And, it had amazing performances. Divine Joy Randolph was particularly good. I
Hmm.
wasn't bowled over by the movie. It felt too long. It was over 2 hours, I think. And it
Really?
felt like something I'd seen before. Curmudgeonly guy that Paul Giamatti often plays, but who has a tender
Hmm.
underbelly somewhere. And sorry, this is going to be a huge spoiler for anybody who hasn't watched it. There's like a sacrifice he makes. He falls on a sword at the end of the movie for the sake of one of the boys that he's been put in charge of, one of his students. So the whole thing is like they have to stay over at this private school over Christmas for all the boys that can't go home to their families over Christmas, and then most of them get sort of a free pass and leave with one of the other boys whose dad comes and picks him up, but there's just one boy left, and that's where sort of the relationship blossoms, and they have like a field trip to Boston and all this kind of stuff, and they bond. And I don't know, like, so
You seem
I just
so enthralled by
I
the
was
film. It's contagious.
yeah. I don't know. I whipped out my iPad during it. Peter got, I think he gave it more of a chance than I did. And it's not as though it's a bad movie. It's not a bad movie. It's just it didn't feel like it was sort of breaking new ground. And Peter and I talked about it, and it was just there's this kind of sentimentality that's infused in it that I didn't feel. I also read a novel, Big Swiss by Jen Began. It was hilarious.
Oh.
It was so funny. I
Oh,
laughed out
a
loud.
hilarious
So
novel.
so
Tell
my
me more.
yeah, yeah. So my relationship to reading fiction is I read it before bed, which is usually like I struggle through a few pages before I just absolutely collapse. But I was like going to bed early to read this. Like it was just so good. It's about this 45-year-old woman who, hey, I like 45-year-old women.
Hello.
I'm a little older than that now, but I'm in that territory. And she's post breakup, and she just does not have her stuff together. And she's moved to Hudson, sort of this like earthy, wealthy, one of these places that likes to virtue signal quite a bit about quite a few things.
Oh.
And
Oh.
she's working as a transcriber for therapy sessions, therapy in quotes, because this guy isn't like a real therapist. I
Oh.
mean, he's yeah, he's like he's not a bad guy, but he is very alternative and in ways that aren't suitable and unsuitable. But anyway, so she does that, and I don't want to give anything away because it is so good and so worth it. Um, but yeah,
What's
she's
the
a
name?
big Swiss,
Big Swiss.
big Swiss,
Okay.
which in itself is a funny title. you know,
It is funny.
it's a
That's what I
funny
was thinking.
title. Yeah. It's really good. It's quite, it's sad and affecting in its own way, but very, very, very worth it.
Okay, gotcha. I'm going to get that one because I need some fiction in my life. I'm reading a
Mhm.
lot of theory at the moment, and I've been struggling to find something. And all the books that I find are very dense and serious. And at the moment, I think I need some levity.
This is exactly it.
So
Because it's like
that's
it's a levity and it's funny, but it's very good writing and very, very good storytelling.
so. I have to say that I'm coming into this episode very fresh because of my travels. I didn't dig into Matthew Krishanu as I usually do. So I'm really looking forward to this one, to being a bit more open about my experience and less into the research. So everything's in your hands, Emily,
Wow.
and maybe it's time to introduce the artists.
No pressure there. Well, it's a pleasure actually, because I didn't know anything. As is the case with me most of the time, I know nothing about anything until I go there. And it was a pleasure to kind of look into this artist who I again knew nothing about. But Matthew Krishanu is a British Bangladeshi artist that draws and paints the places and people in his life. I mean, if you were to put it simply, I think that's probably the way
Yeah.
to talk about him. And this exhibition was such a wonderful experience. It was like soothing to the nervous system, but it also made you think, and it made you, consider there's definitely ideas there that he's considering, but he does so in this really kind of unprovocative way, which sounds like impossible, but we'll talk about that. So I'll note that I used a few resources for my research. There's a book, Matthew Krishno, published by Anomi. Anomi, I think that's how you'd say that. I bought it at the Camden Art Centre, great bookshop. It has wonderful images, of
Mm.
course, but also great text, which is high praise. I usually find the text in art books insufferable, but the text in this book was great. And it has a really brilliant interview with Ben Luke, who coincidentally has a great podcast called A Brush With dot dot dot, and
Mm.
has a really great interview with Matthew. Matthew's website also has links to texts about his work that were really, really great to thumb through. So Matthew was born in 1980 in Bradford, UK. He lived in Bangladesh between the ages of 1 and 12. His father was a missionary that first went to India on the hippie trail and met his mother, who was Indian, while teaching English. So Matthew's childhood memories, the exteriors and the interiors that made up his life in Bangladesh, are a huge theme in his work that were derived. The paintings were derived largely from photographs that had been taken throughout his
Mm.
life. Other themes in his work include religion, obviously, with his father being a missionary, but also colonialism, love, grief, and race. With that description, you might think that, whoa, this is heavy, hard work stuff. But it's the opposite. As I said, he approaches these topics with tenderness and warmth. The lines are soft, the colors are cheerful, and he's so expressive with the paint itself. So Matthew started as a sculptor. He was applying to art school with his sculpture portfolio and wasn't getting any acceptance letters. And a couple things happened to change that trajectory. His mentor at the time was saying, "Look, Matthew, I don't see any of you in the sculptures. Like, they just aren't alive in a way that you could only make
Mm.
these things alive." But his mentor did see him in the drawings for the sculptures.
Mm.
So, I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing, because it's like, where would he be without that sounding board, without that mentorship to kind of guide him and help him see what it is that he and only he can really express through his art? So I loved that. And this also made me think of our conversation about Lubaina Hamid's display at the RA. So this was a display that
Mm.
was
Yeah.
a work in progress for a larger work, but yet very powerful. And, kind of, I mean, obviously she was, she didn't change her trajectory. Maybe she did change her trajectory based on these smaller works. Maybe she was headed somewhere very different, and then she made these smaller works, and it was like, I know where I'm going to go, and it might be somewhere different than I initially anticipated. But so that conversation with his mentor changed things for him. And then Matthew and his brother went to see a Basquiat show in Paris in 2002, and it inspired him
Mm.
to take drawing and painting more seriously. And one of the interviews, he talks about
Mm.
how, he saw, he'd seen lots of Basquiat's work, like in reproductions and
Mm.
books and whatever, but it was going there and seeing how he actually worked with the material and brought it to life that, changed things for him.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thing, the path you take as an artist and also the intelligence you have to listen.
Mm,
Because he could have been told, you're in the drawings and just, continued doing his thing in sculpture. I've recently come across exactly the same story with an artist called Elika Hedayat. She's an Iranian artist who lives in Paris, and she asked me to interview her for her latest book. And so we started talking about her beginnings in Iran. So she studied in Iran first, and she wanted to do animation. And so she went to France. She wanted to I think she applied to the Frénois, I think, I'm not quite sure. She really wanted to go into one type of school because she was into animation so much. And she also applied to the Beaux-Arts, just like that, because she thought, worst case scenario, I'll be at the Beaux-Arts, which is hilarious because it's the most prestigious visual arts school in France. And she was
Maybe
like,
I'll just go there. I don't know. Ho hum.
I don't know. That's my last chance. If I get there, fine. So she was accepted.
Wow.
And so she worked in the Annette Messager's studio, which is, she's a huge artist. So she was already, because that's how they work at the Beaux-Arts. You have artist studios, and then you are in that studio or the other studio. And Annette Messager was a great mentor of hers. But then Christian Bernard came. He's a huge curator, and he saw her work. And then he had a glimpse of her drawings in a corner and was like, Elika, that's where you are. That's it.
Mm,
These are important. And ever since, she's been doing drawing. Drawing is kind of the basis of her work, although she does painting. She does these really beautiful installations of paintings and drawings and murals that kind of connect all these works in her exhibitions. She also did a documentary called Tan. Highly recommend. It's about men's relationship with their bodies in Iran.
wow.
So she was covered, like filming, hiding her body as you have to now in Iran. And there were, bodybuilders and all kinds of men who had been at war and who had lost limbs, like all kinds of relationships with the idea of masculinity and the body. It's a really interesting documentary. So you have to be intelligent as well to listen
Yeah.
to what you're told,
Yeah.
as I think that's kind of the story, isn't it?
Totally. And we all have these conceptions of who we want to be in the world that might be different than who we are in the world, you know? Like, so this is a
Yes.
very small comparison. So so for the longest time, I took piano lessons as a kid. And, every now
You're
and
so
again,
musical. I
I,
forget. Yeah.
not, I mean, like lower your expectations. But yeah, I mean, there's like music has been in my life. I'm not saying that I am a great musician, but I've always had this concept that, like, being able to play the piano really well or being able to do a stringed instrument of some kind is the way to go. And last year for my birthday, I bought myself a ukulele and was kind of banging some things out on it. But
Oh,
it's just not like, I had a realization recently that I'm like, I am a rhythm person. Like, I'm never gonna be a melody, like, that's
a melody person.
a melody
Yeah.
person. Like, and but in my mind, I have a hierarchy of what's good and what you should want to be, and you should want to be able to play, like, recognizable tunes on the piano.
Yeah, we have to say to our listeners that you are a drummer.
I'm a
You play
drummer.
drums.
Yeah, exactly. And it's great
Yes.
'cause, I'm going to Minnesota in July, and we have a very wholesome time when we go camping with my family, and my brother is an amazing musician. Like, he's all by ear, and he just plays the guitar and all of that stuff.
Wow.
So part of the reason I
Ugh,
bought this I know.
I wish.
Yeah.
I
Part
wish.
part of the reason I bought this ukulele was my niece, who's a brilliant singer. Like, she has a fantastic voice. She got a ukulele and she was kind of like playing along with my brother's guitar, and we were all singing and stuff like that. And so that's why I got this ukulele, which, I mean, I could probably bang out a few chords here and there and, just about hang on. But instead, Peter got me some claves, and he got me
Oh,
like to play along
the rhythm woman.
around the campfire, because obviously I can't take my drum kit, right? So it got me a little shaker, and
Oh,
I know, so that
look at that.
wow, and that is love, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, he's like, "Here."
That is someone who knows you, Emily.
Yeah,
That is someone who knows you
yeah.
and who respects you for who you are and, admires the heck out of it. And it's funny because for me, drumming is the
Really?
highest form. Oh, yeah. I'm a rhythm person. I'm not very sensitive to melody, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I'm not into I love Baroque music, but then when it comes to those big symphonies and, I have my favorites. I'm not going to say I don't like it. I do. I love piano. Love it,
Mm,
love it, love it, love it. But I do realize that I'm a voice slash rhythm person for
mhm.
sure. Like Baroque polyphony just drives me up the wall in a good sense. It
Yeah.
just does stuff to me.
And I mean,
What
there's,
can I say? Monteverdi, Purcell, that's my jam.
yeah, I mean, and it's like I love listening to it and all that, but in terms of like actually having any aptitude for playing it, it's just not within my gift. So it's like there is that difference. I mean, with Matthew Krishanu, he could have said, "No, sculpture is like in my mind the ideal, and obviously that's where
Yeah,
I should go, and that's what I want to get good at rather than following the innate path inside of you." And I just love that there was
yeah.
this mentor there who was like, "Hey, check out this mirror, Matthew. This is what you're good at." I mean, and that
Mm, mm, mm,
shaped
mm.
his I mean, yeah, shaped his relationship to art.
But I don't want to say that you should do whatever you're told to do because I think that if he listened, it's because he saw something and it resonated with
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Because you are told outrageous things in art schools. I'm usually a guest lecturer and I do lots of studio visits, and sometimes the students tell me what they're told, and I'm like, no, 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 no,
Yeah.
no, you know, no, I just can't, and I have to hide my bafflement. But
Yeah,
yeah, so be
sure.
careful out there. If you're listening to this and you're a student, it's it has to feel like what I always tell my kids is you have to feel like home. It has to feel like home to you. And sometimes you don't want home. You want something else. You want what you were saying, that idea of what you think is the great thing to do, the hierarchy in your head. But then there's something else that feels like home.
Totally. Yeah. So Matthew finished his BA at Exeter in Fine Arts and English Literature in 2001. So he's,
English literature.
yeah, I know.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Right.
And
Okay.
and then so in 2001, so then you think about that Basquiat show was in 2002. So he
Two. That's the big turning point.
Yeah, and then he completed an MA in fine art at Central St. Martin College of Art and Design in
Oh.
2009.
Hmm.
So there was a bit of
Hmm.
time, and
Hmm.
I love that too. I love that it wasn't like
Yes.
bosh realization and then you're just on your way. It's like, there was some time in between. And he's
Yeah.
obviously, most of the exhibition we're going to talk about is painting. There's a bit of drawing in there, but he morphed as an artist within that time as well. So he's been featured in group shows every year since 2014, and he's had 11 solo shows since 2018, which seems exhausting. It's a lot of output.
Gosh, that's a lot.
It is, right?
That's a lot of
Like, I
output.
don't know. And I was going to
Even
ask
if
you,
you
like, is this like, because I mean,
well,
yeah,
it depends because he's represented by Tanya Leighton Gallery, for example, in Berlin. So these might include smaller shows in galleries and solo shows, maybe in art fair booths. I don't know. So it really depends because it's one thing to have like a massive solo show, 11 massive solo shows, and then you can have solo shows that are smaller in smaller spaces. But to be honest, it's quite a lot. That's quite
yeah,
a lot of solo shows. It's more
yeah.
than once a year, isn't it?
So there
Yes,
was one
that's quite
year
a
that
bit.
he had like several. But yeah,
Yeah,
it could be very well be that it was, smaller. I mean, I
yeah.
guess it would have
Or
almost
it
been
could be
quicker.
touring shows. So
Okay.
maybe showing the same works in several countries. So that could also be because
Mm,
if he's represented by a gallery in Berlin, he may be touring some of his shows. That could also be. But painters are prolific. They're
yeah.
in not all of them, but it's kind of a prolific form of art, I'd say.
Yeah. And for Matthew, he said that it's important for him to paint what you know, kind of that old adage, and paint what you love. He mentioned a
Uh-huh.
commission that he took to paint someone that he didn't know, and he just couldn't do it. He was like, I had 20 tries and it just wasn't coming together. I don't know if he ever delivered it, but you see this in his images. So a lot of the images are of he and his older brother in Bangladesh. So you see these two boys
Hmm.
on a boat, on
Yeah,
a pier, in a tree, and it's almost like looking at two halves of one whole, I mean,
yeah,
and there's obviously a lot of his family and of people and places that he loves. And yeah, so obviously that's a huge thing for him. You see images of his wife and of his daughter. His wife, the writer Ushi Gatward, sadly, she passed away at the age of 49 from cancer in
I know.
2021.
Hmm.
Oh gosh, just awful. I
Hmm.
mean, she got like a stage 4 when she was diagnosed. It was
Hmm.
already stage 4.
Hmm.
And these are really moving scenes in the show of
Hmm.
his wife and his daughter. And again, so it's like grief, loss of letting go of all of these really big themes, but yet he brings you into them so gently. And he
Hmm.
he he makes it easy to stay there for a while, which I really, really
Hmm.
liked.
This exhibition is really about loss, isn't it? Not only about loss through death, but also loss of a place
Mm,
and a childhood um, landscape. Because you do see two boys, so it's him and his brother. So you see that, and they kind of come together. These images and the motifs in the paintings.
yeah. So Matthew tends to work in series of paintings. He has a House of God series, In Sickness and in Health, Mission series. They're all dealing with distinct ideas, but similar images can be seen across them. So the boys, his family, etc. And I mean, so you might even see a similar painting in different ways. So there's a very famous painting in
Yes,
the
true.
exhibition, and one that I think people might recognize for him. And it's so there's the painting is called Mission School, and in this painting you see the backs of brown school children in a classroom looking at an image of the Last Supper. And then in the book that I got, you see that similar scene in a slightly different way. And because it
Oh,
it was part of a
okay.
is part of a different series, part of a different, iteration of it. And I find that kind of difficult because you fall in love with one, and then you
Yeah.
see sort of a facsimile that's not quite right of it somewhere else. But
Yes.
I like I I like having to get over that hump. You know what I mean? Of no,
Mm.
hold on, this
Mm.
isn't right. The floor is pink in this one, and the kids are looking a little bit different. But and I kind of like that that's there, even though I find it a little bit frustrating. But so there's so much to unpick with his work. But maybe it's time to look at the exhibition. Joanna, do you want to take us through the show?
Pleasure. So the exhibition is set in a very specific way because as you arrive upstairs, there's a sort of a rectangular hall where, I'd call it a hall. I don't know if that's the name of it, where from where you go into the big exhibition rooms. So in this hall, there was a choice. Choice was made to show much smaller works.
Hmm.
And they have figures that are sort of diluted into the paint and the elements that the paint represents, such as water. There is one small painting where a boy is swimming. It says so in the title, so we know it's personal. We know it's kind of someone he knows or himself. And it looks like the boy is pushing the paint. It's really
Mm.
striking. And most of these works, so these very small works, are from 10 years ago or more, like drafts, if you will. There's one exception to this. There's a bigger painting, which is sort of mid sized, like 70 by 50 or something, of a grotto or a cave with a
Hmm.
religious display above. So, really at the top of the painting, like a sort of an afterthought. And the whole painting is taken over by a sort of a dark entrance of the cave, at the bottom of which you see devotional candles. But it's mostly a sort of a black void,
Yeah.
a black, mysterious hole. And so then you move into the first exhibition room, and there's huge paintings, like they're really, really big, and
Mm.
they take up the space, which is no small feat as it's a very high ceilinged room. So there are two banyan tree paintings to your left where the roots take up a lot of space, and the figures of one or two boys are up there, all almost minute in this lavish nature. And then facing them, there are two very big portraits, format field paintings, I would call them. They are bizarre because a field would probably be painted on a horizontal landscape like format. But here, as you approach, you're supposed to feel engulfed by the soil or the grass. There's two of them. One is sort of yellow beige, and the other one is green, like grass green. So, up there in each painting, there's a strip of buildings that the painter did not care to paint too specifically. It's all about the field. So,
Um,
as you walk towards them, right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Uh,
It's. I mean, so those are part of the House of God series, and
oh, okay.
those are buildings, as you said, with big sort of color studies, I guess, that are underneath or above. Like he has other ones. The two in the show, all of the color is underneath, but he has other ones in the book where the color is above.
Right.
And they're so in contrast with the banyan tree images, because those banyan tree, I think those were the banyan trees that had lots of paint drip in them. So they just look
Yes.
really
Yeah.
wild. And banyan trees, so like they can grow outward indefinitely, like they just keep growing extra trunks
They're like huge
on.
houses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're the
Yeah.
most incredible things, and he captures
Mm.
that feeling, that immensity of these banyan trees, and the boys are just tiny little figures,
Yeah.
climbing around the
Up
top.
there.
Yeah.
And so on the right, you have a painting with two boys behind the carcass of a big animal.
Mm.
And you can see that I think that's the one that made me think this is painted after a photograph, because it's so awkward. Like the boys are
Mm.
just kind of like looking at the camera, probably wanting to look at the carcass, but they're not looking at the carcass. So I thought kids would be kind of like either moving away from it or in some way interacting with it, but not just ignoring it. So I
Yeah.
thought they were posing for a photograph. And
That
on the other side, there's a huge painting with a big sculpture and again a boy on top of the sculpture. I don't quite remember that one as well. And then you move to the other room through a wall of smaller drawings. So there are the famous drawings that made him realize that that's what he should be doing. They seem like drafts, studies, but they exist on their own. They're quite very different because they are on different kinds of paper. And then you see another set of pictures, and you realize that this
mm.
exhibition mixes past and present, as you have the painter and his brother in a few paintings, one of them of two exhausted boys on a couch, seemingly after a walk outdoors in Cornwall, as the title indicates, still wearing cold weather clothes. And then you have photos of his family, wife and daughter, in the Epping forest. So there's kind of a double. thing, a doppelganger kind of thing going on, where you kind of, there's trees of the Epping forest, there's a banyan tree. So he kind of looks for similarities and differences, of course, within the similarity. And finally, you have the last room, where you have what seems to be photo based paintings of his family in Bangladesh, I presume, especially his father, who was a priest, in religious spaces and settings. Again, pretty large paintings that take up the whole room. The home is
Mm,
quite filled. And then you have for me, the epitome of the exhibition, which is a very, very small painting for once
mm,
of Jesus on a cross. And you can see that it's not Jesus himself. It's not a depiction of the crucifixion, but it's probably taken from a photograph. It's a sculptural piece, so a sculpted crucifix, probably from the family's archive. So I think this is it. I hope my description is vivid enough. So we'll make it more so after the interval, when we'll talk about color, themes, religion, and much more. So we'll meet you right after this small break.
and we're back. We're here at Camden Art Centre with Matthew Krishna's exhibition, The Bough Breaks, which
Shall we
yeah.
talk about the title, because it's very expressive, and I think he does explain it at some point.
Yeah, definitely. And his previous exhibition was Out on a Limb. So there's definitely
Oh,
a theme kind of going on there. And I mean, he talked about, the that whole relationship to being on a branch and kind of putting yourself out there and pushing things as far as they can go. I mean, I think he talks about that in terms of his painting, that he wants to do that within his painting, but then that
uh-huh.
is obviously happening in life as well. And I mean, the
Uh-huh.
whole break.
Yeah, he's referring to the boys on the trees, on the branches,
Mm-hmm.
and how incredibly dangerous it is in hindsight. When you look at those pictures and you think, what were my parents doing? Why was I on top of a banyan tree? And how horrible, it could have happened. And when you know that the context of the exhibition is also a lot about loss, you kind of almost grieve the thing that could have happened,
Yeah.
in your childhood. You look back and you think, oh, there's a moment in, not my childhood, but in my early years of motherhood, where I think about this once a month, where we parked the car. I had two kids at the time, the two older ones. We parked the car. We were taking care of Arthur, who was a baby, and Constanza, she could walk already. She got out of the car. We were in the middle of a very busy road. So we
Oof.
parked alongside a very busy road, and she started walking towards the road. And for some magical, I don't know, intervention
Ah,
of some kind, of some gracious goddess somewhere, I saw her and I grabbed her, and the car was just coming. She could have just
oh,
not been here.
wow.
And I think about that all the time, all the time.
Traumatizing. Like, as a parent, that is
Traumatizing.
traumatizing. I mean, just the thought of that. Yeah. Like, for his parents though, like, this was 80s parenting, was it not? Yeah. Like,
Yes, it was.
I told this story to colleagues recently. So my when I was growing up, my parents had one car, so my mom would go and pick up my dad at work. He had somebody who could drive him to work, but then she would pick him up sometimes. So she would load all four of us in the giant Buick we had, with like a bench seat in the front and a huge back seat. Of course, it was 1979, so no seatbelts, like that was
No
just not a
seatbelts.
thing.
What are those?
It'll damage the child, right? I mean, it'll break their internal organs if it's a lap belt. But my mom had to stop and get gas on the way to pick up my dad, and I was like, oh, and I rattled on the door, like to open the door, because I was like, I want to come in, I want to like look at the snacks that they have by the register, basically, kind of drool over some,
Of course.
Reese's peanut butter cups or whatever. And my mom was like,
Mm.
no, you stay in the car. And so I stayed in the car. I had opened the door a bit. So when she went to
Oh.
leave the gas station, of course, I was sulking against this door and just leaning against it completely, like just
No.
absolutely crestfallen for not having been able to go in. And of course, fell out of the car. And
Oh.
my sister started screaming. My mom stops the car. She gets out of the car, comes around,
Oh.
realized she had stopped on me. Like my little 4-year-old leg was underneath this enormous 1970s Buick. And so
Oh,
she
you're
had to
joking.
get in the car and like
Oh.
back off of
Oh
me.
no.
So she backs
Mm.
the car off of me, takes me to the hospital. And it was the weirdest thing. I got to the hospital and they were like, Emily, point to the leg that hurts. And I pointed to the leg that did not have tire marks on it. So I know, right? My poor mother. And now this story has been retold over the decades. I did not tear anything. I wasn't limping. There wasn't even like my
A
mom was like,
scratch,
it's like there wasn't even
a
like loads of
bruise.
swelling or something. I didn't, yeah,
Emily,
bizarre.
Emily, maybe it's a miracle. It was a miracle.
It's obviously a miracle, Joanna.
Why didn't you take this to
Obviously.
church, Emily?
Yeah, totally.
But
Oh,
I don't want to extend this conversation to 80s parenting. I'm just going to put this out there. So, Diogo had one sister, a brother, and then his mother remarried to a man who had 3 children.
hmm.
So at a certain point, they were like, it was a crowd inside the car. And
Brady
so the
Brady Bunch
so
situation. Yeah.
Brady Bunch situation. So the solution they found for the baby, so Diego's younger brother, was to build a small hammock into
No.
the back of the car,
No.
just like to fling the baby better, if they'd hit another
Oh
car. So
my
the kid was in a
God.
hammock
That
in the sun.
is out. So like in the back window kind of thing, or
Yeah, yeah.
oh my
I
God,
don't know how they did
let's just bake the baby.
Just bake it and fling
Yeah.
it if we hit another car or if we brake too
Oh
hard.
my
Phew, off goes the baby.
God. Wow.
No, Jesus, honestly, how did we survive?
How did
I
we
have no
survive?
idea.
Yeah, that is
Oh,
next
goodness
level
me.
though. A hammock for the baby.
Perfect solution. And they must have been so proud of themselves.
Totally. Oh, they were dining out on that. Do you know what we did? We got a hammock for the baby, and now it's all fine. Oh, we
At
lost
dinner,
him.
and everybody, all their friends, like, wow,
Yeah.
oh, we should do the same. They probably started the trend in Portugal back in the day.
Oh my God, that is
Anyway,
insane. That is insane. Yeah.
crazy.
Oh,
Anyway,
yeah.
going back to the exhibition. So I'm curious to know, did you stay for a long time in the hall, or did you kind of like just breeze through it and go straight to the big paintings?
Here's my problem. My problem was that Matthew Krishanu was there when I was there. So so I was, like,
What?
completely distracted. So I walked into that first, area you mentioned with all of the small paintings, and then I went
Yes.
forward into the paintings that had, like, his dad as, a missionary and kind of the more religious
Oh, you
paintings.
went the other
I
way.
did,
Oh,
yeah.
you went straight ahead.
Mhm.
Okay.
And, uh, and he was in there with a friend, like, talking, and I was like, I have to say, it ruined the experience. And because it was like there was this part of me that wanted to go up to him and be like, "I'm here for a podcast to talk about your thing." And then there was part of me that was like, "No, you just gotta like just be with these paintings."
It's
Yeah,
funny because you're an artist magnet. You saw
apparently.
Sufiana Barbary. I first went into the childhood paintings, like the two boys together, and then I
Mhm.
saw the religious room. But I'm curious to know what you thought because I remember going in And the paintings are so big that I didn't feel like approaching them.
Mm.
And then I remembered him talking about the drips of paint and the banyan trees. So the tree trunks are not very realistically rendered. So his type of painting is very much lines that are quite free but very masterful.
Mm-hmm.
And then the banyan trees are kind of like drips. He let the paint kind of drip down, trickle down. And as I approach the painting, you kind of feel engulfed by the tree. And then you look at the painting on the left, you look up, and there's a boy in the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And it almost like replicates the experience, I presume, of the parents or whoever, or maybe himself thinking of himself in, projecting onto some grown up who would have been there and watching the children play. And it's almost like a sort of lifelike experience.
Mm.
He's almost kind of trying to replicate that feeling of gra- of the immensity of the tree, and then the small child lost somewhere in there and about to disappear into the branches. And I was kind of immediately my thought was, what is this image doing to me? Because after Arya Dean,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a very traditional representation, trying to replicate through representation a feeling or an impression or a situation. And I didn't connect to it. I have to say, I wasn't feeling engulfed by the tree. I understood that that was the intention, but because they're very photographic, the paintings, and I think the carcass one is really gives it away. The subjects are kind of stiff, I found, and repainting a photograph is a massive. I mean, lots of people do that, in drawing and painting. You work a lot from even projected images. People don't want to acknowledge that, but most
Mm.
realists realistic drawings and paintings we see are projected images projected onto the canvas or the
Oh,
drawing.
wow. I
And
didn't know
then the artist,
that. Hmm.
you didn't,
Uh-uh.
huh? That's funny.
Uh-uh.
Yeah, it happens a lot.
Right.
Most artists do that. It's too difficult to work from a small printed photograph, and so you project onto the canvas. I mean, I think art, even representational figurative art, is much more mechanic than we think it is. But then there's that moment where you appropriate the image and then it becomes something that you're thinking about and then you're remaking. And the drips of paint and that kind of the kind of sort of very abstract part of the painting of the branches is really beautiful from afar. And it's kind of mesmerizing and it takes you to the painting. But again, I started asking myself, what where is the photograph, where is the painting? And I could see that it was these masterful lines in the case of the banyan trees, and then you turn your back and you have the fields, and it's much more work on color. His colors are very
Mm.
specific as
Mm-hmm.
well, but I felt like there was a performative aspect to them, where as a viewer you were supposed to be there and feel kind of like buried into the ground, like almost in those fields that he depicted. Um, and then there's the painting with the big sculpture, and I stayed there because I thought, okay, I'm a bit conflicted about this. I'm not feeling the exhibition, and then I stayed there and started writing a little bit my impressions, and then someone got in and did exactly the same thing. They didn't approach the paintings; they just they went through the room, and they weren't in a hurry because then they were at the cafe working. So maybe they were in a hurry for work. I don't know, but the immensity of the paintings kind of were conflicting to me. I didn't quite know how to, and there was no entry point into the paintings. They were kind of
Mm-hmm.
like very wall-like. I don't know. I didn't have the same feeling you did. I think we had a
Mm.
very different experience.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you mean about the images, like the people being a bit stiff in them, and maybe that is an
Hmm.
element of the photograph kind of making it in. But it's like, I mean, you compare his relationship to photography to, say, Gerhard Richter's, who
Mhm.
he was recreating a photograph in a very literal way. And, my impression of Matthew Krishanu is that he's trying to do it in a painterly way. He's trying to do something that only painting can do. So like the drips in the banyan tree, obviously that's a very painterly stroke. Um, but yeah, I mean, I enjoy color on canvas, and when it's that big, and
Mm. Yeah.
when you can feel the movement of the color in the paint. I found that part of it quite
Uh-huh.
thrilling, and yeah, I did feel sort of that immensity of the tree. And there's a few paintings that he has with that kind of perspective. Like there's that one with the kids
Yes.
standing on the play equipment looking down at you. Um,
Yes.
but I find that a lot of his human figures are not exactly proportional, or they feel childlike in a way. I mean, they're sometimes they don't look quite like human
That is
size
true.
somehow. Yeah.
That
But
is true. Even in the other room where you have the most religious settings, the priest and the congregation around the priest, they are painted in a way that looks, yeah, a little bit childish. The all the people, the
mm,
way they're painted in a way as if they had remained children. There's
mm,
something about the way they're painted, that kind of, and you have in the drawings, you can see the way he makes the faces, and
mm,
it is kind of a minimal gesture.
mhm,
He's not into painting over and over and over until you have a lifelike face.
mhm,
Um, so in the smaller paintings, in the ones in the hallway, the thing is that the characters, so the people, the two boys, there's one that I really love, which is the boy in the bed that you see afterwards in a bigger size, and there's the Last Supper
yeah,
in the frame of the bed. So the bed has a frame. It's not a frame. What do you call the
yeah.
kind of sort of
It's
ceilings of the
yeah,
beds?
yeah. So like it's a four-poster canopy bed, I think they call them.
Yes,
So
that's
like
it.
yeah,
Okay,
canopy
we'll
bed.
not be
Yeah.
able to say it again. Yes, it's a canopy bed. That's it. And the canopy is the edges of the painting, one side of it, and the kid is in there, and there's no attention to the face. It doesn't matter. It's
Mhm,
all about the head that's slightly bent, and then there's the Last Supper behind it. And that's such a strong painting. That must be like what, 15 centimeters by 30 or
yeah,
27 or something. It's the smallest painting. And my theory is that he's not really interested in the body and in the facial expressions, and so he gets them done quite quickly. But in the big paintings, for me, that's quite problematic.
mm,
It gives the characters a certain stiffness, and especially the paintings of his wife, where you see her face when she's lying in bed, and she just looks like a beautiful it's just a beautiful face with one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight black lines,
yeah,
and she looks very I hate to say this, but she looks very nondescript. It's not
mm,
her wife, it's the situation he's interested in. It's
yeah,
the setting, it's the beds, it's the bed frame, the back. Do you know what? I don't have any vocabulary for beds. I don't know what to call the
the headboard, or is that what you're
the
saying?
headboard.
The headboard. I'm here
The
for you.
headboard.
But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that he does go for kind of emotion and feeling more than kind of, technical sort of prowess. I think that is part of it. But
But the technical prowess is what brings the emotion. And
yeah.
that's for me the issue, is that I feel there's a sort of flatness. Because I mean, there are paintings in the other room with the religious, the church and the ceremony, the religious ceremonies that I don't know a lot about. I have to say, I didn't have a religious upbringing, so for me, this is very foreign.
Mm,
And I didn't feel that there's any place in the painting where I thought they were very traditional, and there is no scratch in the recording. There's no glitch in the matrix. These are almost, they almost feel like paintings that are emulating the church that you could find in kind of a progressive modern church,
mm,
as kind of illustrative of what's going on in there. I didn't feel, apart from the Jesus Christ that I found, the crucifix that I found really striking and
mm,
incredibly moving, because I can see a child looking at the figure of Christ and all the stories around Christ, and that's how you enter into religion when you're a kid. Sometimes, not
mhm.
for everyone. You can see that it was an issue for me when I was a child. I was in Madeira with my parents, and I go into a church. My parents never took me to church. They didn't baptize me. Probably the only person in my generation in Portugal who wasn't baptized. And I go into this church and I see the crucifixion and I see this bloody man.
Yeah.
And I look at my mom and ask him, "What happened?"
Yeah.
Like really in a panic, like, "What is
Yeah.
this?
Yeah.
Why are we looking at this?
Yeah.
This is horrifying."
Do
And my
people
mom
know?
had to
Yeah.
take me out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
she had to
wow. I believe
take me
it.
out of the church.
Yeah, that would be shocking as a kid.
I
Yeah.
was like 4 or 5, or so maybe that's why, maybe that's my connection, because maybe, but it's strange that you need the personal connection because he is talking about his life.
Did while I was going through and the way that he paints his figures, kind of these soft, clean lines, and each of the characters, they can often be sort of isolated in their own way. It made me think of Edward Hopper. Some of the characters were quite I mean, isolated. I mean, if you like, I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah. Yes. 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 Yes.
It's like the people in, so I'm showing Joanna, for those of you who are listening, a version of Mission School, of the Mission School painting. And it's, there's figures in it and they are together, but they feel separate at the same time. And I don't know, and
Yes.
there's
Yeah. There's
something
a sort
very,
of isolating.
yeah.
They're isolated. Yeah, true.
Hmm.
And they're all absorbed in their own activities. Heads are bent a lot in the paintings, the religious paintings at the end. Even the carcass. The carcass painting really kind of struck me as very much not wanting to overinterpret a photo, and
Hmm.
really thinking about whatever was going on in the minds. Maybe it was a good decision because that's kind of the entry point for me. I was a bit like, why are these kids not looking at the carcass? They're not looking at death. And now I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking that was a good choice actually, because I keep going back to that. And it kind of prefigures the issue of death with his wife. You see a painting of his wife at the bottom of the tree, as you do when you are looking at the banyan tree. She's doing the same thing you do when you get closer to the painting, but it's in the Epping Forest with their daughter. And he says that she was already quite ill in that painting, or maybe photograph that he took of them. So there's kind of this unwillingness, maybe, that children will have of considering, or this unfathomable idea of death that you
Mm.
have to contemplate when you're a missionary son that you're told about all the time, but it's so abstract.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, depending on where you are, you might be seeing carcasses like that reasonably frequently. I mean,
True.
it
Yeah.
might, or parts of a carcass. I mean, I was
Good point.
walking my dog the other day, and he found part of maybe a lamb carcass,
Oh.
kind of out here in the wilds of Wiltshire. I mean, you'll see stuff like that a lot more, and I
Mm,
guess, if you're in
mm,
Bangladesh in the 80s, in the countryside, maybe that's, I mean, it does then beg the question of why would it be a photograph moment, but maybe it was a
mm,
fine specimen of a carcass.
mm,
Who knows? But
mm.
yeah, no,
Yeah,
I think you're right that
you're right.
gazing at the camera does make you feel like you're looking at a photograph kind of setup.
Yeah, I was surprised because I thought if you're digging in, do you know what? I almost felt maybe it's too soon for him. He's grieving. And I felt like the story was behind the paintings.
Mm,
I felt like someone was leafing through their photos and it was a reckoning, some form of reckoning with life, with losing one's parent, with losing one's wife, one's partner, one's companion, the weight it has on a child that lost their mum. And I almost felt maybe it's too soon. Maybe it's too soon to be. He
mm,
needs to paint it for sure. He's a painter, all throughout. You can see that's his life. What he breathes, what he thinks. That's his body. It's in there. But I almost felt like there was some veiling more than revealing
mm.
in the paintings, and I kept thinking what's behind them, what's behind them, almost physically, like did he paint something behind, how did he start these paintings, because I did not feel, and the weird thing is that the entrance, the hall, I love the
Yeah, me
paintings.
too.
I love those paintings, and I think those paintings are very atmospheric. It doesn't really matter what the figures look like. There's also this thing of you can't really understand what these people look like. They're all alike. They're not individualized. And in the smaller paintings, it doesn't matter. You don't have space to draw a face. It
Right.
really is not the point. And the point is the matter, it's the water, it's the cave.
Hmm.
It's there's several paintings of sky. There's a lot of blue.
Yeah. There's yeah, there's one that's called, I think it's called Night Swimming, and it's,
Yes, yeah,
the one I mean? It's
yeah,
basically,
yeah,
it looks
yeah. I
like,
have it here.
yeah, me too. Yeah, it's like there's a kid who, I think it's a kid who is swimming, and it's kind of like maybe far enough out from the shore that it's dangerous, but also far enough that it's fun. Like, I don't get the sense
Yes,
he's in distress,
yeah.
but he
He
is
doesn't know how dangerous what
exactly,
his fun is.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
he has no
he's
idea.
in the
Yeah,
swell. He's in the swell, but he's enjoying this
yeah,
beautiful, I guess, almost sunset from his position.
yeah,
But yeah, it
yes,
wraps up like all of this beauty and precariousness of where this kid is, and it says so much. Like, it's, as you said, it's a
yeah.
small frame, it's a small painting, but I agree. And the way that he renders figures in those small frames is just so wildly different
They're
than
so
he does.
expressive.
Yeah.
Yes, I think in the smaller paintings, it's really beautiful to see because he does what Hopper did, which is to just make the body expressive and not care about the details. It's not about that. It's like he wants to preserve his intimacy and his privacy and his life, but he wants to talk about that experience.
Mm,
And he wants to talk about emotions and experiences. And the small paintings just do it for me. They're on paper, they're oil on paper, and they're just so incredibly moving and so incredibly expressive. Whereas the bigger paintings, he has to stretch out these figures
mhm.
and he has to make decisions about these figures. And the decisions he made, I mean, for me, I'm sure they will move lots of other people, and maybe people who have had closer experiences to what his life is maybe will see it differently. But for me, they made it quite difficult to connect. It felt like, augmented figures rather than really, specific bodies. I mean, the Cornwall painting is quite nice. I
Mm,
really love that one. But
yeah,
again, I think it's a smaller painting where the kids, you can just feel like they're exhausted after the walk. They're freezing.
yeah,
They came from Bangladesh. It's fucking freezing in Cornwall. There's wind,
yeah.
and they just cannot believe what happened to them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, I think you're right. It's like there's another one of the small paintings of, two boys on a log over this like raging river. They're
Yes,
very high perch on a
yes,
log, and there's kind of and the one right next to that is them on the boat, on the front of the boat in a very placid lake. And it just I don't know, there's something about the storytelling there about, that
yeah.
discovery as a young person and not knowing necessarily that, oh, we're in calm waters now, or actually we are over something really precarious, or, it's just that discovery of what all these different, you know, feelings are, and you're
Yeah.
getting to know them so that you can spot them later on. And but yeah, I agree. Of the bigger paintings, the ones that I felt were the ones where he was really working with the paint. So I really loved the paint
Hmm.
dripping in the banyan tree.
The banyan trees, they're quite beautiful.
And I
Yeah.
loved the color studies. Like there's just so much going on. But I think what I liked about the bigger paintings and maybe just about the imagery was that, he painted his father as sort of a white guy clergy in third person. It wasn't sort of like
Yeah, that's true.
he was
Yes.
embodying his father, but it was, these images of him, putting, liturgical wear on, other people, the brown people that are around him.
Hmm.
And, that it says so much about colonialism and about
Hmm.
the, kind of, conversion into, the missionaries wanted to convert people to Christianity.
Proselytizing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
proselytizing, thank you. And, but it says so much about that while without losing some of the grace and love that these people, presumably his dad, genuinely had about that mission. So it's like it's both end,
Hmm.
it's
Hmm.
like there's part of you that feels uncomfortable with it, and maybe he feels uncomfortable with it, but there's also like a big part of it that it came from an understanding of what love is and what grace is and all of that. That's the part of his work that I really, really like. And even the grief bits, it's like, his wife as she's sitting there on that pier with his daughter, or
Uh,
in the tree, the weight of his wife in those pictures, it's heavy, like it's really, really heavy. And it's very simplistically rendered, but I mean there's a lot of power to it too. And I think too, Epping Forest and Connaught Water, which is the water that she's on, she and his daughter, those are very familiar places for me as well. I mean, we live in North London, and
mm,
have spent, I mean, just so much time around Connaught Water and, in that area. And I think that's part of it too, was, just a personal connection for me. I really appreciate the fact that he goes into notions of race and religion with that both and feeling. That's what I got with those. The colors are bright,
hmm.
they're cheerful. The people are not angry, or unwilling. They're just there
Mm,
doing this thing that,
mm,
these cultures have collided, and this is what's happening. And there will be
mm,
ramifications, but he's not necessarily, engaging with that. He's sort of capturing
mm.
the how.
Yeah, and the normalcy
Hmm.
of it. of us on the outside saying, oh, this is a colonial process that's still going on,
Hmm.
and that left its marks and left its religions and its mores and, all of these things and these beliefs. And he saw it as something that was real. It
Hmm.
was just an everyday thing for him. And it's true that you can see it as something that has no asperities. E- Everything is soft curves, painted in soft curves. The heads are very round, the shoulders are super curved.
Hmm.
Everything is done with a lot of with a delicate soft touch. They're painting like they're sinuous, and at the same time not too serpentine. The shapes, they're really round, and the colors, the whites are very bright, and it's very yellow as well. I imagine it's the color of the sun there. I just came back from Portugal, and my light is bright white light
Hmm.
that burns your retinas. Whereas, maybe that's the light he remembers, everything very yellow. And it is true that there's something of acceptance, and when you're talking about grief, where and when and how is the acceptance coming in. And that's why the Christ is so interesting for me, because it's kind of sideways. It's not an upfront Christ, so you can imagine that it's probably as well taken for I mean, no, it is it's slightly slanted. It's not
Hmm.
completely sideways. It's not. He's not centered in the image. There's kind of a, a it's white on the back, but there's some blue beneath it, so you don't know if it's a wall. He seems suspended in an atmospheric cloud. It's a very small painting, so I guess for me it's a problem of format.
Yeah.
I go to the small paintings and I love them.
Yeah.
And he is there, kind of like his arms are two lines, the chest, the legs are kind of two lines as well. And and then you have the very rigid cross behind,
Hmm.
very kind of like two lines, very dark. And I love this painting because I don't quite get it. I don't quite know what he's trying to say, but I kind of feel a little thread that I know I can pull, and it's going to take some time to understand what's going on in this painting. I asked myself, to what extent do the biases you have and the prejudices you have, because I mean, I really do not I haven't had the religious upbringing. I come from a very Catholic country, so for me personally, I think maybe that's where, because that second room for me was brutal. The third room was kind of brutal. Coming in there and seeing so much religious painting
Hmm.
was, as a colonizer, which is my
Yeah,
history,
but on the
maybe,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, the flip side of that is he has sort of the white priest, his father figure. But there's also lots of representations of brown Christianity. So you have the brown nuns,
Oh, yeah.
you have,
It's
you know,
the majority of it, I think.
yeah, yeah. So there's ownership taken, perhaps, that he's trying to,
Mm hmm.
demonstrate as well. But I agree, and
Mm hmm.
I really, I really like your notion that the bigger paintings are potentially more of a veil than a reveal. And I think that's an interesting idea. And I think if I were to go again,
Mm
that would give me a very different perspective with
hmm.
all of the work. But I think that these small ones are really phenomenal, and they felt most moving, and I think told, to me, the viewer, the most poignant story. So
Yeah.
which one would you take home if you could from the show?
Yes, and that's the funny bit. I was thinking as I was listening to you, I was thinking it's so interesting, isn't it, that we spoke about liking and disliking. And this is not about liking or disliking. I didn't dislike the exhibition. It was kind of a conundrum for me. And it's so interesting that maybe I didn't connect a lot to most of the paintings, but I am passionate, and I'm saying passionate, weighing my words about the cave painting. I
Ah,
was
yeah.
so struck by it, and it may have been that painting that kind of ruined the rest of the experience, because I didn't see it at first, and then I went around the room, I saw it up close, and then I kept looking at the paintings, and I looked back for some reason, maybe someone was coming in, and I saw it from afar, and I just had the most incredible physical reaction to it. I just felt engulfed, like I didn't feel in the bigger paintings, by it, taken into it and into the mystery
Yeah.
that probably is the religious feeling, isn't it? It's a sense of mystery and miracle and life and death and disappearing and appearing, the candles that are not providing any light to that hole. They're not
The,
lighting it. You
the
don't know what's inside.
the black behind the candles is abyss black. Like it is an abyss
Absolutely.
behind those candles.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you still want to go in. I mean, I felt like
Mm.
I'm going to the mother of mothers, and I'm going to go into that hole, and it's exactly what he's depicting with the kids, which is what is dangerous is also fun, and you're attracted to
Mhm.
darkness as you're attracted to light, and you try to bring light into darkness. I don't know. That painting, if I could have it, of course he's not, after everything I said, he's not going to give it to me, but whoever owns it, well done you, because
Yeah.
that is a painting I would love. Of all the exhibitions we visited, I think that was one of the strongest impressions.
Really?
And
Wow.
yes, I loved that painting so much. And it just made me want more from a single painting, but knowing that the more would have to come from me and not from the painting.
Uh,
There's something magical to me in that painting. I just loved it. I would take it home and I would look at it every day.
yeah, it is spectacular. And I mean, again, it's like there's that abyss black, but then the candles that are lit are cheerful colors. Like it's this
Yes.
really great juxtaposition of, just sort of merrily we go into the abyss, kind of feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And also Bangladesh, that contrast of the carcass and the colors, the incredible colors that you probably see in that country. I don't know. It says so much without showing a lot.
Mm. Yeah, definitely.
How about you?
I
I can see
mean,
that you're looking at your pictures.
I
You're
am.
looking at your book.
I'm looking at on my phone with all the pictures on it. But yeah, I think it would be definitely night swimming, the one we talked about.
Oh, yes. That's a lovely one.
Yeah, it just like, and I think that is definitely one of the common threads in his work is that danger of childhood, that
Mm,
danger of being drawn into things that we don't realize could end us.
mm,
I mean,
mm.
and
And also, I think being in the context of a very colonial approach to a place that comes from the heart,
yeah,
but that you're in a bit of history, and your body is a mix of both histories, and you have no idea. I think there's also that kind of thing of the all the things you ignore as a child, and the very pure innocent relationship you have to things. I mean, there's lots of evil and cruelty in children, but one thing you can say is that whatever your parents bring to the table, you take it,
yeah,
and you don't know where it comes from,
yeah,
and you end up being brought up in those values and those beliefs and those whatever, those stories that you told. And that's why I think the second one I would take is the boy in the canopy bed with the Last Supper behind it.
mm,
And the Last Supper is painted
yeah.
beautifully. because it's the exact amount of figures that you need to know exactly what what the painting is. And that moment of loneliness and of soothingness of being in your parents' bed. There's nothing like being in your parents' bed.
Yeah.
There's something a little bit like that cave. Well, you
Mm,
feel the danger because it's intimate, but at the same time, you want to be there. It's so nice.
the
It's
best.
so good.
Yeah,
It's the best,
absolutely.
you know,
Yeah.
whatever relationship we have with your parents, there's something about I mean, sorry, I'm just going to take that back.
Yeah.
No idea. But
Yeah.
because probably there's a few of you out there who will not feel what I'm talking about because very little is universal. But from what I take from my conversations with people, a lot of us feel that relationship with our parents' bed, but
Mm,
probably not all of us,
yeah.
let's face it.
Yeah.
But yeah, personally, I really relate to that. And also of being in Portugal in a very dark spaces because it was so hot. My parents come from the central region, and going back to the family, to the village, and having to be in total darkness in the afternoon because it was so hot,
Mm,
and being on the in those unfamiliar beds with lots of religious imagery as well. Although my family's not very religious, but there was obviously, in a Catholic country, you can't escape it really.
yeah.
So that's kind of something that I can that is in the back of my mind, in my unnostalgic memory.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Joanna. This is brilliant. I just feel like, you know, just hearing you talk about your experience of the exhibition has given me so much more to think about, and it makes me want to go back and see it again.
And you have the book as well, so you have much more.
Mm.
You have a bigger knowledge. I think that what you said about um, the presence of that white leader, a religious leader, but then in a sort of a calm, serene gathering, a religious gathering in faith around that man, of all those, of course, brown people who were from there and who willingly were there and found solace in someone else's religion, is something that I didn't think about, to be honest, in the show. And I mean, I feel deeply connected to Buddhism, so in some ways, I'm also, I guilty of appropriation, maybe, I don't know, but it resonates with me. I love it. I go back to it. It helps me. It sustains me. And so nothing is in its place
Yeah.
in globalization. And when there has been exchanges, some of them violent, some of them less violent, some of them very few with regards to the people you're proselytizing. I don't know, it's a complex matter, and when you're part of it, it is asking a lot to someone who's part of both cultures, maybe to, at a young age, provides a very clear entry point for you as a spectator.
Mhm.
So that you made me think of that, and it's true that it's a very interesting perspective that he has.
Mm.
And the question of, did these paintings and did this religion provide acceptance and solace for him as a grieving partner? The question is not answered, and I like that. I
Yeah.
think that's very important aspect. It's not moralizing, it's not telling you what to think. So yeah, I mean, thank you. It
Yeah.
was it was really nice because I kept my resistance to the exhibition a secret,
You did.
because I wanted, I thought it was going to be interesting to see, how we could talk about this. And as usual, you bring something to the table that I had not seen at all. So
That's
that's
the
what we're
beauty.
here for.
That's the beauty of exhibitions and about talking about
Beauty of
it and
exhibitions.
about talking about them. Definitely.
Exactly, because we visit exhibitions so that you have to.
So
Don't
that
forget.
nice. Nice working in the tagline there, girl. Like it. So next time we are gonna go big with Judy Chicago Revelations at the Serpentine Gallery. So we are going to be
Yes.
sharing that episode. If you have a chance to check it out, or if you have a chance just to check out Judy Chicago before that, that's wonderful. Obviously, never a prerequisite. But with that, I guess we shall see you next time.
We shall see you next time. And Emily, I have to say, I'm really excited about the next one because I am eager to go beyond the dinner table, which is what Judy Chicago is known for,
Mm.
and to know and to go deep into her work, to know it better. So I'm really excited about that one. Stay tuned, hang in there, and see you next time. Although we don't see you, but we feel your presence. So, we'll see you next time.
All right. Take care, Joanna. Bye, everyone.
Take care, Emily. Bye bye.